As you can see there, Chris is already hitting the hard stuff. It's going to be one of those podcasts, isn't it? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Same Old Arsenal podcast. I hope you're all doing as well as you can be after what we saw last night. I can tell you, as someone that was at the game, it was not the most enjoyable evening. There were a couple of problems with the tubes. It took me a long while to get home. Had to do the long walk down Upper Street to get to Angel. For those that go to the Arsenal, they'll know how much of a long walk that is after a pretty dismal evening. But back here this evening with my good friend Chris, who's just done a 7-hour drive today, mate. Massive kudos to you for actually coming on the podcast after that.
Thank you, my friend. But always, do you know what? When we were in the car, I said to my wife, she was like, "You're right," and I said, "Yeah, I'm really tired. I didn't actually sleep very well last night." She said, "Oh, why? What was up?" I woke up at 5 o'clock and I was stewing about Arsenal. That's how much this football team impacts me. I was stewing about Arsenal. And she said, "Well, actually," and I said, like, "Oh, we've got this big journey." And she said, "Well, do you know what the best thing? You just need to get it out of your system. You need to talk about it and get it out of your system." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm podcasting later at 6." And she went, "Perfect." So this is the catharsis. So I wouldn't miss this for the world, mate.
So there's a lot to unpack tonight, mate, isn't there? But let's start with just your overall thoughts on what was a very, very disappointing showing at the Emirates last night.
General top line 1 minuter. This felt like a weird one. I had weird feelings about it before the game because I saw one of those Orbinio stats, which was like West Ham have lost their last 7 or they've not won in the last 7 games at the Emirates. And I hate those stats because in my head, I always think, well, one day that's going to obviously come back and it's going to change. That doesn't seem to work for us. You know, we never apart from the COVID year, we never win at Old Trafford. We never win at Anfield. We never win at the Etihad. But those sort of, hoodoos, those stats that you get from Orbinio, they always impact. So I was worried beforehand. I saw a couple of people saying this should be easy. And then when I saw that David Moyes has never won at Arsenal, I was like, oh God, this is going to be one of those evenings. And the first couple of minutes, I actually thought, nope, we're on it. And then we get to the unpleasantness on about 15 minutes, which we'll talk about. But yeah, that was kind of initial thoughts. And yeah, I've got lots of things to talk about, atmosphere, some of the players and bits like that. But I'll pause it there. So I guess you want to get your reflections in.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll touch on all those things because they all played a big part in why I think last night went the way it did. But I think just to get this out of the way early doors, because I don't want to give West Ham too much credit, I do have to say I think they were fantastic last night. It does pain me to admit, but I thought defensively, I've not seen a team defend with that much. I don't know what the best word to describe it would be, but they were like
discipline.
Well, they were hornets. It felt like whenever we got a player, whether it be Bukayo Saka, Martin Odegaard, Gabriel Jesus, within a couple of yards of their penalty area, there were 3 players on them at any given time. It was so rare to see Bukayo Saka, just doubled up on, because there were normally a couple of them, more than 2, getting close to him. And sometimes you have to say you've come up against a really good side. West Ham are in a good run of form. I don't think that excuses the things that went wrong for us last night by any stretch of the imagination, but it's certainly the best West Ham team that I've seen come to the Emirates. And credit to him for getting the win. I mean, obviously, we don't want to touch on this for too long, mate, but what was your take on, how West Ham took the game to us?
Well, I think game state is obviously a really, really important thing. And when a team scores early against, if a team has come to essentially low block and try and hit you on the counter, if they score early, the tone is set for the match. And we were masters of our own downfall because there were times, particularly the likes of Zinchenko, we were at the ball at walking pace, which was very frustrating. That was harking back to the bad old days of David Luiz standing on the ball in our own half doing nothing for about 30 seconds. It kind of felt like that at times. West Ham were good, but I think defensively they were good, but their story and their approach was made easier by us. And as soon as they go 1-0 up, all they have to do is sit bodies in the edge of the box. And that's all they did. They just congested the final third. I lost count of the number of times that they had I counted every single player in their own penalty box. And that was happening from about 20 minutes in.
Do you have to say, though, from our point of view, fair enough, West Ham did defend. They defended really, really well. But we didn't put enough pressure on them, I felt, throughout the entire course of the game. And that is more of a problem for me because they had their second choice centre-back pairing in there, in Ogbonna and Mavropanos. So Ogbonna, you know, very experienced player. I think he was the captain on the night, but he's over the hill, if we're being totally honest. Then you've got Mavropanos, who has been very in and out of that West Ham side, hasn't quite found his feet. Of course, it was him that pops up with the clincher for them. But we didn't do enough to test a back two that just isn't their favoured one. And that's what really frustrates me, because we should have done a lot more. They didn't have Zuma in there. They didn't have Aguerd in there. And we just never looked like scoring against them.
No, we really, really didn't. Interesting point from Phil McAvoy. I describe our style as delusional domination, as it's pointless without any steel in front of goal. I think this is a really interesting point, and it goes back. It sort of links to my comment a few minutes ago with regards to the way, like the tempo. It just felt like the tempo from us was a little bit. Do you know what? We're Arsenal. West Ham are going to sit on the edge of the box. We just need to be patient. We need to be patient, and the chances will come. We'll create stuff and we'll get in behind, but it never really happened. Like, I've seen all the stats. We'll get into the shot stuff, because I do want to talk about the number of shots that we're having in games and how we're not converting. But if I think back to how many chances, and I'll ask you this question as well, can you enlighten me, other than Saka hitting the post? And in the second half, there was a good save from I can't remember who it was, from a header. I think it might have been Gabriel Jesus, that the keeper palmed over. But apart from that, I'm really struggling to think of how much we worked the keeper. And it just felt like they wanted to play with the ball. They wanted to play with the ball in front of them. They were going to sit on the edge of the box. And so what's incumbent on us is tempo. It's move the ball quickly, like play it out wide to Martinelli. If he let him have a run, if he doesn't get any success, then play it back. It had to be quicker. But the whole evening, the urgency just wasn't there. And I think that then also has a knock-on effect on the atmosphere. I don't want to talk about that yet, because it feels like a separate point. But I think it was incumbent on the players last night to do their bit, because I think the fans would have got up for it if they had a little bit more to shout about. But we had very little to shout about last night.
Yeah, it's very true. And going back to your point about in terms of testing the keeper, the chances I can really think of, the Saka one that hit the posts, rebounds, comes to Trossard. You know, it's a very difficult shot for him to take when it's coming at that speed off the post. Fair play. But then you've got that Saka header. You've got the Trossard shot that was saved by Areola. Sorry, choked on a bit of water there in the second half. And apart from that, the Gabriel Jesus header that he misses, which doesn't test the keeper, everything else was down the throat of Areola. And it was just like, there was no pace on it. There was no zip on the ball. There was no power behind it. And I completely agree with you. It was a very easy night for him. Everything we did was very tame. And the most, I already said what concerned me the most is that we didn't test their reserve defence enough. But what's equally concerning from our attacking point of view is that Saka, Jesus, Martinelli, and I have a feeling Ødegaard did as well, they're all down on their numbers at this point last season.
Shall I give you some of those numbers? I've got some of them.
Please do. Please do.
I don't know the like for likes, but I saw Akil, a friend of the show, Akil, had said this as well. In the Premier League, we've got Bukayo Saka on 5 goals. I'll only do goals because in product. Eddie Nketiah on 5 goals. 3 of those were scored against Sheffield United, against one team who were just diabolical. Ødegaard 4, Havertz 4, Declan Rice 3. Gabriel Jesus has got 3. I know he's been injured, but still, that's not good enough. Leandro Trossard 3, Gabriel Martinelli 2. We're now at the halfway stage. So I know you can't exactly just extrapolate and times it by 2, but based on those metrics, if we have the same second half of the season that we had this first half of the season, we're going to end up with Saka on 10, Nketiah on 10, Ødegaard on 4. You know, I'm sure Gabriel Martinelli got like 15 goals last season. Based on these numbers, he'll hit 4 or 5. It's just, it isn't good enough. And I genuinely think I wasn't sure about this a few weeks ago, but I think we've got a serious confidence and we've got a problem in our attacking play at the moment. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm sure we'll go on to discuss that in a bit more detail, because I think there's so much to unpack about Saka and Martinelli both being out of form. You know, Ødegaard arguably holding onto the ball for too long at times, even though he was possibly one of our better players last night. I mean, so many things we can unpack. But let's actually talk about the game itself before we go into those details. Chris, it was the pretty much exact same starting 11 that we've seen in weeks gone by. It's really nice, and I said it to Amanda on one of the most recent podcasts, that we've actually got a bit more of a settled 11, because in the couple of games earlier on in the season, we didn't quite know who was starting where. We had injuries. You know, we had Partey at right back. Gabriel wasn't in the team. But now we've got a very settled, very regimented 11. And it was one simple change. Havertz was out, who I think was a big miss yesterday. I really think he was a big miss. We really needed his physicality, and unfortunately his replacement, Leandro Trossard, who I absolutely love, I hate to say it, was dreadful. What did you make of that midfield three, Chris?
So I looked at that starting lineup and I thought, that's right. We know that's spot on. We know that West Ham are going to want to play the ball, play everything in front of us. They're going to sit deep and they're going to try and hit us on the counter. So we're going to have a lot of ball. So playing Zinchenko, he's had his problems. I don't think he was great yesterday again. I thought he gave the ball away again a number of times. I thought he was poor for the second goal. Like, everyone's looking at Gabriel, who didn't win the header, but it was Zinchenko that started off marking him. Whether he should have been marking Mavropanos is a different question, but Zinchenko was all over the place. It felt to me like the right sort of side, because we were going to get congestion, and what we wanted to have was players that can pick locks. And Trossard, he's nippy, he's tricky, he's that sort of player. But I feel like this isn't the first time we've had this conversation, mate. I feel like we've had this conversation a couple of times when we've seen Trossard playing in that midfield, and we've just gone, it doesn't work. And it feels like, imagine the Trossard of 11 months ago that just signed for us, and we were playing him, sort of rotating him with Martinelli, or he was playing as that false nine, and he just looked brilliant in that front three. And I've heard a few people say, yeah, but he's a little bit older, and maybe he's going to move into more of a central player. That doesn't feel like it works in him in the 8. And is just as a final thing, who'd have thought? I don't know if you are the same as me, mate, but I never would have thought in a million years that we'd be having a conversation about how we miss Havertz 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, I said the exact same to my dad, I think it was last night, that I can't believe we're talking about the fact that we're missing Havertz. And that's actually a really interesting comparison there from a friend of the show, James Johnston, about Trossard being likened to Mkhitaryan. It was very Mkhitaryan-y, who was actually smashing it into Milan. We've got to say, he's doing very well for himself. But Trossard, I was open to the idea of him playing in that left 8 role. I think, I mentioned it on the podcast a couple of times earlier on this season. I really liked when he played there against in pre-season, sorry. I think against Barcelona in one of those games, he had a really good game in that left 8 position. And it's been okay at times, but it really frustrates me when we've got someone like Smith Rowe waiting in the wings, who we all know is, arguably the guy who could do very well in that position. I would like to see a lot more of him in that role. And I can understand, Smith Rowe, not long coming back from injury, been in and out of the team so much this season, barely got a sniff. I think he's played in something like 7% of our available minutes, which is absolutely nothing. But he's just more naturally suited to that role. And Trossard, for me, he's got to be that rotational option in that left wing position. And at times, in a desperate situation, the guy that plays up top in the centre forward role. It's really nice to have that option of Martinelli and Trossard. They're two very different players playing on that left-hand side. But it didn't work against the midfield of West Ham's, of Souček, Alvarez, Ward-Prowse, a very physical, very demanding midfield. And we just couldn't live with them. And we were punished. Brilliant counter-attack by West Ham, has to be said. That was always going to be their danger. And you look at their forward players, Paqueta, Kudus, and Jared Bowen. I mean, it's a very good front three. West Ham have had some absolutely horrendous players up top in years gone by, but that was a very, very exciting, very fluid front three that can all interchange, that caused us problems. And we're going to get on to talking about the VAR controversy over the goal, but the defending, first and foremost, on it was shocking, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Sunday League football. I'll talk about defending in a second. Can I just do a quick thought on Trossard? I think you kind of alluded to this, James. I just feel like he's a finisher, isn't he? You have starters, you have finishers. He just feels like a finisher. He feels like a 60-minute, 70-minute player right now, because when he's come on, he's impacted games. And like you said, that just feels like a rotational player. Just one more thing I'd also say before I talk about the defending. Karen said, is Havertz back for Fulham? Also, because she's put a question mark, it reminded me that we do have questions. So we'll do 10 minutes at the end. So if you guys want to put any questions, I'll star them as we go through. And I should probably also, I always forget to do this. So I'm gonna look after you here, mate. And I'm going to chuck in. We're sponsored by Ruth Beck Art. James will pull up, or I'll pull up some stuff at the end. But if you don't already know that, then give Ruth a follow. If you don't already know, you should. She does some great stuff. So yeah, it's lovely to have her sponsoring the show. But little mini ad break to one side.
Hang on, Chris. Before,
go on.
What is the answer to Karen's question? Is Havertz back for Fulham?
Yeah, he should be, because
Should be.
he picked up 5. Yeah, it's a really good point. She's answered questions. I've not answered it. Classic Chris Howard there. He picked up 5 yellow cards, so he's now served his suspension, and I think it all resets now because we're beyond the halfway stage. So any player that is on a certain number of yellows, so we had Gabriel Jesus and Ben White both on 4. I don't think they have a suspension now because we've come up to the halfway stage. Defence, calamitous. I saw again another Orbinio stat. You know, we've conceded 8 goals from the last 15 attempts on target. I don't know what the ratio is for average, most teams, but that feels like we're being massively punished for everything. But once again, lapse of concentration. I just feel like Gerard Bowen getting in there was poor. Like as in the lack of sort of closing down was poor, and then Souček just kind of wandering
out of nowhere.
into the middle point. It was just nobody seemed to have any kind of spatial awareness of where Souček was, and he just tapped the ball in. It's pathetic.
It is, isn't it, mate? But should the goal have stood? Because in the stadium, there was a long VAR check. It felt like it went on for at least 5 minutes. And obviously, in the stadium, you can't really tell exactly what's going on. They didn't show any replays of the incident. But having seen screenshots after the game, I get that it's inconclusive. But you made the point in our WhatsApp group last night that if it's inconclusive, then how can they give the goal?
I don't know. My problem with this whole situation is I want to see goals in football. So if there's no conclusive evidence to rule out something, I would rather that be applied universally. And what I'm talking about there as well is offsides. Like, if we're going to allow goals like that, then I want to see goals that have, a toenail offside be given a tolerance where they say, do you know what? His toenail's offside, but that's not a big enough margin, so we're going to give it.
Don't say that, mate. We'd have dropped points to United if that was the case.
Well, yeah, exactly. But do you know what I mean? It's like, but for every United drop point or thing like yesterday, there'll be 4 or 5 other instances that, if we think about it, we would have then benefited from that we've lost out on.
Absolutely.
I want to see goals in football, and I'm now at a point where I'm like, if you're going to do toenails offside, you can't suddenly just to play guesswork. But I'm not going to spend too much time like gnashing my teeth at.
Do you think
injustice? Mainly because we still had 70 odd minutes plus to win this game, and so it's unacceptable to use that as an excuse. In fact, if anything, it should have fired us up to say, right, we're now going to come at you with waves, and we just didn't.
Do you think part of the problem potentially is that we've now seen officiating change in a way where everyone just lets play go on? If you know what I mean? Like with offsides, you see them raise their flag after the ball's gone out of play. You're waiting ages for the flag to go up, and you're just wondering what the hell that was a really blatant offside. Why has he waited so long? And there's this kind of caution from officials to not stop play by raising their flag in fear of getting it wrong. Because I think in years gone by, you might see an official last night say the ball's gone out of play and we kick off and that's the end of it and nothing happens. But because play is allowed to go on and, it continues, the ball goes in the back of the net, because it's not, clear and obvious, it's a goal, for better, for worse, however way you want to look at that. Obviously, from our point of view, definitely not for better. But do you think because the officiating has changed in that way where we're just allowing play to continue, that's resulting in the types of goals that we're seeing last night?
100%. It has to. If you think about it, if you're a referee or a referee's assistant or mainly it's just the referees and the referee's assistant, or you think, well, it's all right. If I get the mistake wrong, then I've just got this backup in Stockley Park that can just do it for me. So I just won't give stuff. Like, whereas we might have had an official, perhaps not, because I don't know what side of the pitch the official was on. Because I think the goal was in between him and the player. So he might not have been able to see that to rule it out. But it just feels like it's an excuse now to not do anything. And what happens there is then you get people coming back, like when they VAR looks at it and say, well, it's not clear and obvious, but we'll go with the on-field decision. So the on-field decision is wrong, or the on-field decision is not something that they would have done pre-VAR. But if VAR then doesn't interrupt because it says, well, we'll go with the on-field decision, it's like this weird, stupid circle of mentalness.
Yeah, absolutely. But like you say, we had more than ample time to get back into this game. And in that first half, I don't think we were dreadful. I think that would be the wrong thing to say. But, our passing wasn't as accurate as it could and should have been. But we did create two good chances to score, both coming to Bukayo Saka. He had a header that was saved by Areola, and he had that opportunity which hit the post. And it was another good opportunity as well, where Zinchenko put the ball into the box and just no one got on the end of the cross, which was a really good cross. One positive out of what was a very difficult night for Alexander Zinchenko. But we should have scored in that first half, shouldn't we, Chris?
100%. And yeah, it feels like every sort of half chance at the moment, every time a player drops his shoulder and fashions a little bit of space, they're either dragging something wide or they're larruping it straight down the throat of the goalkeeper. I think somebody said that in the chats earlier. It's just everything seems to be going down the throats of the goalkeepers at the moment. And so we're getting 30 shots on goal, but most of them are just sort of standard, training drill shots, really. And that's the biggest problem I have, is that the quality of our finishing seems to be quite low. I feel like last season, like people said at the halfway stage, we had 50 goals and we've got 40 goals now, so we're 10 goals less. But I'm sure I read stuff saying, we were massively outperforming our XG, which suggests that, we were getting the rub of the green. Someone would have a pot shot from 30 yards and normally 1 out of 10 of those goes in, but actually we were having 4 or 5 out of 10 of those going in. And it feels like we've gone even the other way now. I don't know if you feel the same, but it just feels like we're getting punished for every tiny mistake defensively, and we're not getting any rub of the green offensively. But I do think that's a confidence thing as well.
I definitely think our finishing isn't as good as it has been in years gone by. And I do think that comes down to a lack of confidence in some of the players. I mean, some of the shots Bukayo Saka was having were just so tame. Like that, he gets into that position, he cuts in, creates the space for himself, but then he'll just put, a 10-mile-an-hour shot right down the throat of Areola. He wouldn't do that last season. He'd find the bottom or top corner. Martinelli is he's just not getting a sniff of goal, to be honest. He's losing the ball whenever he gets close to it. He's a player that's drastically out of form, and I think we've got to be having a serious discussion around whether he actually starts that game against Fulham. It might do him the world of good to actually come off the bench in that game. And let's not forget, Martinelli is a fantastic footballer. I've seen him getting a lot of criticism, but without him, we don't take 3 points against Manchester City earlier on in the season. Him coming on at half-time transformed that game. So we know what a good player he is, but it just so happens that a lot of our key guys that play in the final third of the pitch just aren't hitting form at the minute. And when they're all so out of form, that collective is a big, big problem. But I do think in terms of a collective, we're way too predictable. The play just goes from sides to sides. You've got players differing on the ball, like Zinchenko, like Erdegaard, Ben White. A lot of these guys just hang on to the ball. They don't know where to pass it. They're trying to look for an opening, but no one's making the runs. It was very, very reminiscent of some of the games I saw under Arsene Wenger, around 2011, 2012, that type of football where we just didn't have the personnel to cut teams open. The difference is that now we do have world beaters, but the teams we're playing against, they've got a blueprint now for playing against us, and we have to find an alternative. It's difficult when you've got guys like Saka, like Martinelli. They're 22, like they are still very young. It's expected that they should go through these periods where things aren't going to go well for them. But I do think, in terms of a bigger issue, I don't know how you feel about it, but for me, we are way too easy to read going forward.
Yeah. Well, do you know what happened last season? If you remember, last season, we had players that were in form. When they dropped a little bit, somebody else stepped up. Like, do you remember at Christmas, we lost Gabriel Jesus from the World Cup? And I don't know about you, but I think we were on this pod going, I don't know what we're going to do here because Eddie Nketiah can't step up. And Eddie did step up. And he ended up getting like 3 or 4 goals out of 5 or 6 games during the end of December and then January period.
And when it dried up for him, Trossard came in.
Trossard came in and then he started banging some goals or assists. And then when he started to dip a little bit, we saw Saka. And so that's what's not happening this year. Maybe it's an unfortunate situation that they're all out of form, but something's got to give. I mean, I put a tweet out earlier. Check some of these numbers out, mate. Wolves at home, 19 shots we had. We got 6 on target. But at the time, you win 2-1 and you think, we've won the game, it's fine. Luton, 23 shots, 9 on target. I think James Johnson in the chat also alluded to this, like the number of shots that we've had or whatever it is. We won that game 4-3, and we're all just running the high of we've just scored a last-minute goal. So we're not actually looking at things like this and going, should we be worried? Villa, we all agree we should have easily have won that game. 12 shots, only 5 of them on target. Brighton, 26 shots, only 9 on target. And then the West Ham game, 30 shots with 8 on target. We have an issue, and that is better quality of our finishing. And in all of those games, it's not like I can remember. Like, if you think about the Brighton game, I don't remember Luke Steele, was it Steele, or whoever the goalkeeper was. I don't remember thinking to themselves, blimey, they've just had the game of their life. Because when you look at 19, 23, 26, 30 shot attempts at goal, that's the sort of stats that you start to think that goalkeeper's had a blinder. But like yesterday, I don't really remember blinders from goalkeepers.
No, who was it that always had a blinder against us? I want to say Jack Butland, someone like that, where we would pepper the goal and you'd just be like...
Jeskalainen back in the day, mate.
Oh, God, yeah, don't remind me. Don't remind me. But you can't really say that about Areola last night. I mean, he did make a couple of good saves. I can think of about 2 or 3 good saves that he made. But they're saves a keeper of his caliber should make. But we just didn't do enough to make it really, really difficult for West Ham and their keeper. But going into that second half, I thought we started quite brightly. We did create a few half chances, but you could tell the urgency, the tempo was there. And that was something that we really missed last night. And there was about 2 spells of about 3 minutes each where the crowd was raucous and we had to score, I feel like, in that opportunity, in that small window where everyone was up for it, because the atmosphere, like we're going to go on to talk about, was not good last night. And there's a few reasons why I think that is, but when the crowd's going for it, the players get fired up, you score, it gets the crowd going, you potentially go on to score another one. This could be a very different story, but we weren't able to do it. And we get caught on the counter again. West Ham win a corner, and it's a brilliant header from Mavropanos. Poor defending from us again. At 2-0, with, I think, what was it, half an hour left to go? On paper, the game's not gone, but you're coming up against a David Moyes side that are very good defensively, that we've not looked like scoring against all evening. I have to say, mate, I really did feel like that was game over at that point.
Yeah, 100%. I actually... because I was in Northumberland, so I didn't get to go to the game with the wife's family, and I was watching it with her uncle, and I literally got up and went, I'm not watching any of this rubbish, and I walked out of the room for about 2 minutes, and then I walked back in because I was like, well, there's still plenty of time, but it was then depressing to watch the remainder of the game, because we've just seen 2/3 of the game where we've walked around the pitch half the time. Do you know what for me is that more depressing about that game than the result? Because if we've smashed them with 30 shots and we've had 15 attempts on target and the goalkeeper's had an absolute blinder, I could find some crumbs of like hope this morning. I could say, I call them, me and my brother call them Championship Manager games. Like back in the old day, you play Championship Manager and there'd be 1 or 2 games a season, even if you top the league by like 20 points, there'd be 1 or 2 games where you'd play some random team and you'd have like 30 shots on goal and they'd score with their only chance. It was just like some sort of weird algorithm thing that, tried to keep you on your toes. And I would call that, you call that the Championship Manager games. So occasionally that just happens in football, but we just didn't actually deliver that kind of peppering of the goal. And when I started to think about it, which was the numbers I gave you, I then started to think, this is happening quite a lot recently, and that's a worrying concern. Like for most of this season, the defeats, I've been able to almost write it off in my mind. Newcastle away, we got shafted. That shouldn't have been a goal. We weren't great, but that's a 0-0 game. Fine. Chelsea, they caught us a bit cold. We didn't have a great game, but for the last 15 minutes, we decided we're the Arsenal. We're Mikel Arteta's Arsenal. We're going to show up, and we could have won that game. We drew 2-2. Villa away, it felt like, that's one of those games. But that was only a couple of weeks ago. And this was the first game where I was like, we were poor. We were at walking pace. We had no end product. We didn't look like we were testing the goalkeeper. Like there's very little positivity that I can take from yesterday's game. I don't know if you feel the same about that.
It's difficult, mate. I think we we dominated the game, and that's what I've seen a lot of people saying, that we dominated the game and we had the lion's share of possession and we created X, Y, Z amount of chances. Our XG was good. I think a large part of that is down to West Ham allowing us to play that way. I don't think, they ever intended to play on the front foot, and that's not me having a dig at them. Why would you? I mean, the game plan works for them. It was very reminiscent of what we did to City back in 2015. If anyone remembers that game when we scored 2 goals, Santi Cazorla, Olivier Giroud. It was a great defensive performance, and we were just caught wanting, and we just didn't. We didn't have the firepower, we didn't have the tenacity. There was just not enough speed, not enough tempo, and like I said before, we just look a bit too predictable. And I think maybe there's an element of, I don't want to say lethargy, but players looking a bit dead on their feet. I mean, this is an 11 that we're kind of running into the ground at the minute. I said at the start of the show that it's great that we've got a team that is a little bit more balanced, a bit more settled, but because we've got players like Partey, Tommy Yasu, Fabio Vieira, and many more still on the injury list, it means that when we come to busy periods like this, we can't rotate in the way that we would like to. And I think last night probably could have been one of those games. And you have to say, going into Fulham, we can't really rotate there either.
The only thing I'd say as a counter to that, mate, just to say the slight disagreement is that we've all been I've certainly been talking to a few mates, a few WhatsApp groups, talking about how we've been quite fortunate with the way that the fixtures have fallen. Like, we had a solid week to prepare for Liverpool, and then we've had a solid 5 days to prepare for West Ham. And during the Christmas period, normally it's every few days. Like, I get the between West Ham and Fulham, but I feel like we've been almost given a bit of not an advantage, because West Ham also played on the Saturday that we played, so they've had 5 days too. But there can be no excuses about fatigue for me when you've had 5 days off, and the club gave them 2 days off rest, Christmas and Boxing Day, or Christmas Eve and Christmas. So there was no excuse for that lethargy, and it worries me ahead of the Fulham game as well, because we've got less time to prepare. And this goes back to your point, we've got to play the same 11. Like, who you might bring. I would bring Emil Smith Rowe in, because after about 2 minutes of him being on the pitch, do you remember there was a ball in and he sprinted and he just missed it with his header, into the box. That was a darting run. And I thought to myself, that's the first deep lying proper run that we've had. But you got Havertz back in.
So. Well, I do still think there is a way we can fit Smith Rowe into that team. We're not going to get onto Fulham just yet. We will in the next 10, 15 minutes or so. But let's talk about the substitutions, because obviously we go 2-0 down. He didn't make the substitutions immediately. I mean, we had that opportunity through Gabriel Jesus that he really has to finish at the back post. I mean, he scored one not too dissimilar to that against Luton, I think it was. But this was, gilt-edged chance, has to put it in the back of the net. It spurns Arteta into making those substitutions not too long after or before, whenever it was. Brings on Emil Smith Rowe, who I thought was good when he came on. But he also brings on Reiss Nelson. And I've got nothing against Reiss Nelson. And I think we're still, his career is still living off that game against Bournemouth. But I don't think he's a bad player by any stretch of the imagination. But is he going to be a game changer in a match like this? To come from 2-0 down to bring it back. I don't think he is. I mean, you could argue he did it against Bournemouth, but is that going to be, replicated on a more regular basis? I'm not sure. I just going off on a bit of a caveat, is Reiss Nelson someone that you would potentially be looking to cash in on come January?
If you can get money, then yes, 100%. Again, he's a Haylender, so I always feel like you need to temper your comments, and you need to show the love to the Haylenders, because they're your lads that have grown up. So I want Reiss Nelson to be successful. I want Eddie Nketiah to be successful. I want to see the likes of Rule Waters and players like that coming through. But the reality is they're not all going to make it. And Reiss Nelson feels like the signing of him to a new longer term deal in the summer feels like a weird one, because some of the noises about how much Arsenal have offered him to stay just felt very strange. Like, I'm not going to give any numbers out because we've all seen and read the stuff. So, but what is the point in paying a player that amount of money to essentially get token minutes towards the end of the game, in the hope it's almost like a Hail Mary throw? And I don't know about you, but when I saw Nketiah and Reiss Nelson as the options coming on, I was hardly thinking, right, we're going to do, we're going to spread them for width, or we're going to do, this is what we'll do differently. I didn't have any faith, and it makes me think more and more that I don't know if the club can, but they need to be looking at striking option and ASAP. And if we go back to your original point, if someone comes in and says, we'll give you money for Reece Nelson, I don't think it'll be massive money, but I'd probably say take it, because it then gives you the opportunity to say, right, we've filled up a space. Let's go and get somebody on a loan deal that we then say to them, look, if it works out, we'll buy that player, like we've done with Raya. We'll get a loan, buy them in for the summer. We need to do something, mate. It's not working at the moment. And last January, we brought in Trossard, and it made the difference for a period of time. We need a Trossard-like signing to come in and have the same impact.
Yeah, I have to say I wasn't particularly inspired either when I saw Eddie and Reece warming up, ready to come on. And that's not to discredit them, because I do think they are good players. And I do think they have a place in this Arsenal team. I just think that place happens to be when we're 2-3-0 up and, we're looking to see a game out. Eddie showed in the game against Brighton, with the assist he got for Havertz's goal, which was a great assist, by the way, that he can provide something off the bench. But when you're chasing a game and you're coming up against a low block that are going to be harried to every single ball that you put into the box, they're not the guys that I have true faith in getting on the end of it and turning the game around. And if we can get money for them in January and potentially reinvest it, I mean, we've got a very short window in which to do it, only a month, and we know how quickly that will fly by. I think we've got to seriously consider that. But then again, I'd even be looking at someone like Aaron Ramsdale. If we can get some money in for him, pains me to say, because I love the guy, but what we really need is something up top. I mean, goalkeeper at a minute, we had a long discussion about this earlier on in the season, but it's just not even at the forefront of my mind at the minute, because the attack is just so painfully predictable. And they're just like-for-like substitutions, aren't they? Eddie, Reece coming on for Martinelli and Jesus. Same players.
Can I chuck something and get your view on this? What about playing Havertz centrally and moving Gabriel Jesus wide left and Saka wide right?
Well, I mean, those are the not even experiments. Those are the types of things we need to do in game states like we saw last night. If Havertz was on the bench, for example, absolutely bring him on, move Jesus out in place of Martinelli, maybe keep Saka on or play Reece off the right. I mean, lots of different options we could potentially do there. But it just so happens we had no Havertz, we had no Fabio Vieira. I think Thomas Partey is becoming a bit of a miss at the minute, to be totally honest. I think what you could have done with him last night, Partey at 6, Rice in the 8. We're just lacking.
Sorry to interrupt. The depressing thing about Partey is that we're going to get him back for like one game, and then he's disappearing off to the AFCON. And probably Tomiyasu, if we get him back, he'll disappear off to the Asia Cup. So we're essentially in this predicament until mid-February if we don't sign any other players. Sorry, go on, Karen.
No, absolutely, mate. And look, I don't want to talk too much more about the actual 90 minutes last night. We've lost the game 2-0. Has to be highlighted. David Raya, kudos to him for making that penalty save. I mean, if the result was any different, we'd be giving him loads of plaudits, and God knows he needs all the confidence he can get at the minute. So fair play to him for making that save. It doesn't mean anything in the end, but that will do him on a personal level the world of good. But I mean, there's a couple of individual players that I want to talk about, Chris, and the one that immediately springs to mind for me is Zinchenko, because we criticised him for the goal that we conceded against Liverpool. He's been under the spotlight quite a lot recently for his defensive performances, because teams are coming on to us more now and he's being targeted a lot more. We're starting to see his defensive lapses become a lot more prevalent. And it wasn't just his defending that I thought was poor last night. It was the stuff that he's actually good at that I thought was really poor. His passing was just all over the place. He wasn't, making things work for us going forwards. And in the end, he was substituted for an attacker in Reece Nelson, which kind of tells you how poor he was on the night.
Do you know what it is about Zinchenko? I think you said this right towards the beginning of the show, the too many touches thing. Like we all get, like particularly in a game like yesterday, I think it was probably poor organisation to put him on, a 6'3" Mavropanos for the second goal. But his dallying on the ball that's the problem. Like technically, he's a good passer. He's good at linking us. He does good things. We know about his flaws defensively, but at home against a Brentford, a West Ham, a Luton, an Everton, a Bournemouth, that's the sort of game that you expect Zinchenko to be, for us to be like, he's fine. But my issue is the dallying on the ball. It's I want 4 touches instead of 3 touches. I want, I'm going to receive the ball and then I'm going to release it quickly. I'm going to look up and release it quickly because we know he has the quality to. His peripheral vision is such that he's receiving a ball. He can turn a move very quickly into an advantage to us by his very quick movement, his vision, his passing range. But we're not getting that at the moment. What we're getting is receive the ball, touch, look up, maybe another touch, and then release. In the Premier League, that 4-second window, 5-second window compared to a 2-second window, that can be the difference between we've just created a good chance and nothing. And that's my biggest issue with Zinchenko at the moment, which is what you said earlier. It's the dallying.
I don't think it's just him that does the dallying, though. I mean, he is definitely guilty of it. But one player that we don't often criticise is Martin Odegaard. I thought he did that a hell of a lot last night, like just keeping the ball at his feet, being slow to release it. I think there were times when it worked out. There was an opportunity when we were 2-0 down and he had the ball in West Ham's box and was basically just passing it in between his feet a couple of inches before releasing Ben White, who put the ball into the box and it didn't go anywhere. But it does work sometimes, but it slows our play down so dramatically. It allows the opposition to get back into shape, not even at a fast pace. They can do it quite leisurely. And it just plays into that predictability that we've got going forward. And I just feel like last season, we just moved the ball so much quicker at such speeds. I mean, remember the goal we scored against Fulham away from home where Saliba passes it out to Xhaka passes it, to Trossard puts it into the box for Martinelli. We're not really seeing those sort of goals where we're breaking at pace, where, we're effectively pulling the opposition's pants down. We're just not doing that at the minute.
Do you know why that is? I've got my theory on that, and that's because of this whole, we've all talked about it all season, Arteta and his obsession with control, his 600,000 passes. Like, he wants us to be impenetrable defensively, and if that means that we're a bit more methodical, I think he's kind of accepted that. I think there were times last season where he thought, this is too much chaos. I don't like this chaos. I can't control chaos. Because you know what Arteta's like he's literally chess player. He's moving his players around. Right, you go here, you go here. Right now, you need to move this, do this, make that pass, do this. He wants so much control that his preferred style is this. It's slower, more methodical. And last season, we were a little bit more, crash and crashing boxes and, back to front super quickly, 3-4 touches and we're away. And that's what's not happening this season. I think it's by design, and that slightly worries me.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. And I think the biggest worry for me is we can dominate games, but good defensive teams are going to be more than happy for you to do that. And if they've got opportunities to counter like West Ham do with the likes of Kudus, Bowen, and, so many other teams can play that way. If they're not fussed about dominating football matches, they can quite simply set up in a way where they can play on the counter. And that's where we're most susceptible to damage, I feel, because you saw it against Liverpool. If we lose the ball when we're dominating, in inverted commas, we are so open. If we think we're in control, but we lose it, whether it be a wayward pass, whether it be a player getting caught in possession, whether it be something as stupid as Odegaard and Zinchenko getting their words crossed in the game at Anfield and the ball, resulting in a 5-on-1, we have got Saliba back, basically, because everyone else has pushed up so far forward. And it's great. I love that we're penning opposition in, but when it doesn't work, when we lose the ball, we are very susceptible to damage. And we saw that last night. That's what resulted in both of the goals. But look, we've lost the game 2-0. I don't want to, be all doom and gloom because, it wasn't a calamity of a performance. It wasn't like West Ham absolutely battered us. We're on 40 points. We're on course for an 80-point season. Will that be enough to win the league? I don't think so. No, I certainly don't think so. But Chris, is it a case of we've not peaked yet and we're going to peak at the right time?
Last season, at the beginning of the season, do you remember after about 8 games, there was some sort of Daily Mail article or something like that about Lord help Tottenham if they actually click into gear, because they weren't playing great, but they were still picking up a few points. And ultimately, that's not the case. I'm not trying to compare us to that team, but you can't just, it doesn't feel to me like it's all about to explode. it feels to me like we ran hot last season without, the chance creation and, taking advantage of our chances. It feels to me like we've still got a young front line with the likes of Martinelli and Saka, who are, as you said earlier, experiencing these issues. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the recency bias of the fact we've just lost 2-0 and I've just watched my team put in an absolutely turgid Christmas performance, and it was all just a bit depressing because the Liverpool game, I came out of that match. I mean, I obviously didn't do the post-match, but I came out of that match saying, do you know what? Absolutely take that point, because we controlled. This wasn't we got 2-0 up and then Liverpool just dominated us and smashed us all over the park. I came out of that game saying, what we're doing is we're on track, And I remember writing during the week, we're on 40 points now. If we beat West Ham, we go to 43 points. I think we're absolutely on track and in the mix, and we can win it. And all of a sudden, in the recency of the fact of that performance, from one performance has now made me think, well, now we're on 40 points. We've got some worrying signs. Trends are developing in terms of our profligacy in front of goals. We've got a lot to be worried about. We need to make a move. And so maybe it's this long rambling monologue is just the thoughts of a football fan that's reacting in the emotion of a situation. Because if we go and beat Fulham, if we then play Liverpool in the FA Cup and beat them, I think there's a week off after that. Yeah. And then we play Crystal Palace at home. If we then beat Palace at home, suddenly I'm thinking, okay,
yeah,
maybe
with a few signings, fingers crossed.
Yeah. So I don't. What a long and rambling way of saying I don't really know, James.
So, okay, Chris, I'm going to ask you the even broader question of, are Arsenal still title contenders? Now, I know saying that out loud, that sounds incredibly hyperbolic given that we've lost one game, but I saw a lot of reaction last night of people saying that this is the game for me that confirms Arsenal aren't going to win the league. And if you had reservations about us winning the league this season, I think that's absolutely fine. Like, I will openly say I've never been entirely confident that we will win the league. I've always wanted us to be there or thereabouts come April. If we're within 3 to 5 points come April, I'll be happy. I'll be very happy for us to, make a push. That, I should caveat with saying, is dependent on where we go in the FA Cup and the Champions League. Because if we're knocked out of both of them come that point, I won't be happy. Because I really think we've got to win silverware this season. I would be really happy with the FA Cup, the Champions League. I'd love one of the big two, obviously. But I think we really have to win some form of silverware this season. But in terms of the Premier League, I think it's going to be so difficult. I look at Liverpool and I know they've got, a few issues here and there, but the variety they've got in attack, Jota, Nunez, Gakpo, Salah, there's a couple of guys I'm missing out there as well, but they've got a lot more variety in their forward options than we have. City, they've had a pretty poor run of form. They turned it around with a 3-1 win at Goodison Park, coming from a goal down. They've got Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne to return. I honestly, I think we were talking about it last night. We could see City winning the league quite comfortably this season, which is sounding incredibly defeatist because there's still a long way to go. But do you have us down as a team that can be lifting the Premier League title come the end of May?
We are absolutely a team that can and are title challengers because we're on 40 points. And what are we, 2 points behind Liverpool on 42? And everyone's looking at Liverpool. Do you know what? This time last year, on the halfway point in the season, everyone was talking about us as running away with the league because we were that many points behind. Maybe it'll do us good to not be the front runners and to be in the mix. If we match, I talked about earlier about the problems with goal scoring and stuff like that. We match what we've done this season. We finish on 80 points. It won't be enough to win the league, but I think we'll probably be within 5 or 6 points of the eventual winners. So, are we title contenders? Yes. Do I think that we're going to win the title? No. For the reasons you've just highlighted with City and Liverpool, their attack is such that I think it can be the difference. But Liverpool aren't, like, I speak to Liverpool fans, they're not smashing everyone to bits. Like, some of their recent results have been somewhat fortuitous. Man City don't seem to get going. And Amanda said on the show a week or so ago, when we did the preview show for Liverpool, she said, I've spoken to some City friends and they think they're not clicking like they did last season at the same time. Like even when they weren't clicking last season, they were saying, yeah, we'll come good in the latter part of the season. So they're seeing issues. Liverpool are seeing issues. This league is going to be won on mid-80s points. So what do we need to do? We need to do what we've done this season, but the Tottenham sort of game, where we drew 2-2, we can't have those. The Villa game where we've absolutely peppered them and we should have won the game, but we haven't. Last night, we can't afford these games because we've got to go to the toilet bowl in the toilet bowl in North London. We've got to go there. And just to remind everyone, we've won there like once in like the last 12 years or something ridiculous. So we don't normally get anything from that. And if you said to me right now, you take a point there, I'd say, yeah, you got to take a point there. We play Liverpool at home. You've got to win that. We go to the Etihad. We always lose that. We go
Old
to
Trafford as well. Yeah.
Old Trafford, we always lose at Old Trafford, we got to win. The Etihad, pick up a point. Tottenham, pick up a point. But you've got to play.
I think we've got to beat Tottenham, mate. I think Tottenham away from home. I know you're saying a point, and look, it's a North London derby. We know it's not just any other game of football, but I really think if we're going to be serious about this, you have to win away at Tottenham. We did it last season. I don't think there's any reason why we can't do it again.
Yeah. I mean, that's the optimism that I want. So again, we need to go into this optimism. So let's be a bit more positive. We're 2 points off Liverpool and we play Fulham. Like if we win against Fulham, if we show up against Fulham, if we put in the same performance against Fulham that we did against West Ham, we've got a problem. If we play the same performance against, do you know what, even against the likes of Liverpool or Brighton, we should have enough to beat them.
Yeah, and I mean, that segues on nicely just before we get into the questions. So if you have got any last-minute questions, do let us know because we'll be taking them in the next couple of minutes or so. But it's Fulham up next, mate. We simply have to win that game. If we fail to win it, then I think a lot of people will be saying that is the title all but done for us. I know it's ridiculous to say that in December when we're so close to it, but you can't drop points at home to West Ham and then go on to drop points away to a very out of form Fulham side, it has to be said. I can't quite remember when they last won, but I know it was early December when they put 5 past the team that we lost to yesterday evening. But apart from that, they've been having a couple of rocky results.
No Raul Jimenez either. He's suspended. Who's their main man?
Exactly. And what will that be? Carlos
actually, he might be back. I think he might be back.
Well, whoever it is, I mean, we should be capable of dealing with Raul Jimenez. Whoever it is up top for them, Saliba, Gabriel, I have full faith in them to keep Fulham at bay. But it's the attacking side of the pitch that we need to, be better in. And going into that game, would you be inclined to make any changes?
I'm sort of tempted with what we talked about earlier with Havertz and then play maybe Jesus left and Saka right and have Martinelli as a man that you say to Martinelli, look, it hasn't been great for you at the moment, so I'm going to take you out, but I'm going to give you 20, 30 minutes. So at the end, like someone's coming on. Let's turn Martinelli, let's see what he can do as an impact player. Say the same to Trossard. Well, mind you, you've then got, if you're playing Havertz up top, you've then got the decision as who plays left 8. Do you know what? Give it a go. Emile Smith-Rowe came on, looked all right. I thought he created chances. I thought he tried to make a few forward moves. He's a good player. He's a player that likes to run with the ball. We've got to do something. And do you know what? We owe Fulham one as well because that felt like that was a funny old game, that 2-2, wasn't it? Because it was like we really turned. We went 1-0 down just for a bizarre just stupidity at the beginning of the game. Dominated the match, went 2-1 up, and you're thinking, go on and win it. And then we just brain fart ourselves right towards the end. That should have been a comfortable victory. It's really poor. So I feel like we owe Fulham something.
Absolutely. And it was one of those games that last season I think was probably one of my most enjoyable. I spoke about it earlier, but I still have dreams about that Saliba ball out to Granit Xhaka, I think it was. I mean, that was absolutely fantastic that started that move for, I think it was Martinelli's goal. And Trossard getting a hat-trick of assists that day as well. So certainly a game that I've got fond memories of. I think from my point of view, because I feel we need to mix it up and last night was so predictable, I would like to see Smith-Rowe come in. And I know that might be a bit of a gamble, given that he's not played a lot of minutes, but we know the qualities he's got, and we need something that's different to the front three that so many teams are becoming accustomed to playing against. And I would actually start him on that left-hand side where he played so well for us a couple of seasons ago. So I'd have Smith-Rowe on the left, Jesus through the middle, Saka on the right, and then have the option of Trossard and Martinelli off the bench. The midfield three, Rice, Havertz, Ødegaard, and then we know the back four picks itself. I would love to see an option that's different to Zinchenko, but I just don't think we've got it. I mean, I'm not really.
You wouldn't do Kivior?
No, I wouldn't, because I think we need to dominate the ball, and okay, we might get a bit more defensive solidity from Kivior. But I mean, we saw him against Luton. He wasn't really convincing in that game. I think, yeah, this is one where Zinchenko continues to play. And I've not really got an issue with that. I mean, hopefully he's not tested too much defensively and we have a lot of the ball, so it's not too much of an issue. If his passing game is on point and it's a lot better than what it was last night, then yeah, fine. But yeah, I would keep the back four as it is. David Raya in goal, Rice, Ødegaard, and Kai Havertz, and then yeah, I think a front three of Smith Rowe, Jesus, and Saka would be lovely. It won't happen, but it's a nice thought. I think Smith Rowe has to play football soon. But before we wrap up, mate,
just on that, can you just look at Lee Bowley just put in a comment? What do you think about switching Saka and Martinelli?
I would be up for it, but he's not going to do it. Reason being, he loves those inverted wingers, doesn't he? So, I mean, I do get it, and I would be very much up for it. And I think we've got a front three that should be a lot more fluid because Gabriel Jesus, you know, he's played so much football as a winger for Manchester City in the past. He should be drifting out to that right-hand side, interchanging with Saka, interchanging with Martinelli. And they do it occasionally, but just not enough. And Jesus is dropping so deep now that he's giving me, you know, dare I say, a bit of a trip down memory lane to Lacazette, which I really don't want to.
No, mate, I'm not having that. You're not
No,
comparing.
no,
you're
no,
not
I'm not.
comparing
I'm
Gabriel
not.
Jesus to the waddler.
I'm not, but in the way that he drops so deep that when we actually need him in the box, he's on the halfway line. I mean, I get it. He's being asked to play that way and bring players into the game, but it's that sense of desperation just to bring, you know, the game forward that he's dropping so deep to try and receive the ball. But yeah, no, I totally agree with the point that we should be, you know, a lot more fluid across that front three. But yeah, like I say, mate, before we go, any questions from our wonderful viewers?
Well, let's do a quick one. Dunanonymous. I think this is a bit. I don't know if this is a serious question or not, but let's put it up. Saka is a 9.
I get it because he pops up in so many positions that are central where he could potentially score from, but nah, not for me.
Nah, it's not. I mean, we're talking about a sort of a focal point, and Saka. It just feels like Saka is better on those wings. So yeah, I wouldn't have that. Do you know one thing I will say? It's a question from me, James. What about Leandro Trossard at left wing instead of Martinelli? Because think about the gap. I think Trossard's best game last season was away at Fulham. Do you remember? I think he got 2 or 3 assists or something.
Yeah, absolutely. He did it. He got 3 assists in that game. And if it's not going to be Martinelli, then I think the obvious choice for Arteta is going to be Trossard. But for me, just because I want to see him play, I would be going for Smith Rowe. But maybe, you know, Arteta's got one eye on that game in Liverpool in the FA Cup a couple of weeks away. So that could be an option for him. But look, I just want to see something different. If I see that front three again of Martinelli, Jesus, Saka, you know, you'd think I'm crazy for saying that I'd be a bit, you know, dejected to see that again because we wanted that so much earlier on this season. It's taken so long to actually get them as a trio playing together regularly. But because it's not working, you know, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again. I just want something different, whether it's Trossard, whether it's Smith Rowe, whether it's Kai Havertz up top, whether it's Reece Nelson playing on the right-hand side. I just want something different.
It feels like he should do something different. And lovely Phil Macker, who is a regular contributor, and we always love getting his views on. I think we've sort of touched on this with players off the boil. Should he make full use of his squad and start? I don't think he'll start Ramsdale. I think both you and I, James, are unanimous in that we should probably give. I'm not sure about Nelson, but Smith Rowe a go. But I think we both agree it ain't really going to happen. I don't think. I think my view is that I think with Emile Smith Rowe, he needs to have a 30-minute cameo where he absolutely bosses a game, which makes Arteta go, oh, okay, I've got other players out of form. Maybe I'll do what I did when I brought you in for Chelsea and all those years ago, and I'll give you that start. He said nice things about ESR since he's come back, which he's always been slightly sort of reserved in his comments with Smith Rowe. And I feel like since he's come back, we've been hearing things like, "Oh, he's training like a beast" or stuff like that. So I don't know. I
Yeah,
feel
and it does him no good, really. What we saw yesterday. I mean, look, it wasn't like a minute amount of time that he had on the pitch. He had, what, 15, 20 minutes? But he
yeah,
needs longer. He needs more of an opportunity to prove what he can do. And I do think he'll start in the game against Liverpool, but he is a very, very, very good footballer. So let's see him play.
yeah. No, we'll do one more. It's from Karen. I think it's an interesting one because it touches on the atmosphere stuff again. I don't know if we've done the atmosphere stuff
We
enough.
haven't yet. We haven't.
So let's just wrap up with the atmosphere then. Do you think that the ballot system and less allocation for the Ashburton Army is affecting the atmosphere? Because Karen does. What do you reckon?
Well, I know they've split the Ashburton army up slightly, haven't they? And that is, yeah, that is causing a problem. And I do, these things do play a part in it. Absolutely, the ballot system as well. I mean, you're not really able to, unless you're a season ticket holder, you can't familiarize yourself with the people that are around you. And we're in fortunate positions where we've got season tickets and we know the people around us, and it's almost like a little community that you meet up with every time you go to the stadium. But if you're a silver member, you might not get to go for 6 months at a time, which is frustrating because it wasn't too long ago that silver members had a lot more access to tickets. So I do think that plays a part. I also think the expectation at Arsenal has changed enormously. Last season, we were riding the wave of, euphoria because we never saw ourselves as title contenders. To go from finishing fifth to then being a team that was going toe to toe with a treble winning side is mental, especially when you consider, it's taken us so long to go from the likes of Mustafi, David Luiz, Socrates to world beaters like Saliba, Gabriel. And this season, because we had such a good campaign, I think we go into every single game now, with the odd exception of maybe someone like a City at home, because the atmosphere there I thought was great. But apart from that, the atmosphere has been very flat for a lot of games this season. It's not just last night. Throughout the entire season, I feel like it's been pretty subdued. And I think that's just because there's an expectation.
Can I counter that? I would say I don't pre-COVID sort of Arteta Arsenal and Emery Arsenal. I would agree. I would say it's better than that because I've seen times where we've gone behind. Even last night, we went behind and I saw the fans being like, "Come on, Arsenal, you could do this." And there is still that from last season sometimes. I mean, I was just watching on TV, so you can correct me if you want, mate. But I feel like there's more of that than there was the pre-COVID Emery area, Wenger area. But it's not the same as last season for those reasons that you've said. I think also the way we were playing last season was like basketball. It was like, we would just rapidly go from back to front and then we'd be clinical and it was just exciting. So there was a lack of expectation. Oh, we're just delighted we're in this position. We seemed to score goals for fun, although we couldn't keep them out because our sort of concession of goals last season compared to what we've been doing so far was a lot higher. So it feels to me like this season is methodical Arsenal, whereas last season was almost like rock and roll Arsenal. And that coupled with the expectations being so low is probably impacting it.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree that there is still that sense of, we're going 2 goals down. You still hear we're by far the greatest team the world has ever seen, just the same old chants. And I still think fans very much believe that even in the most dire of situations, we can come back and do something. But when you see games like last night, because the football isn't the most inspiring, I think it's hard for fans to really, believe that we can come back and get into the game. I saw there was a lot of talk about fans leaving early last night, which they did, like in their droves from about the 85th minute. I think a lot of people had seen enough. And I get, people say that that's not on. I would also say that it was quite late in the evening on a Thursday night between Christmas and New Year, and there were train problems. So I do think you have to give people the benefit of the doubt there. But it was, a disappointing evening, mate. We've got Fulham up next. One last question before we wrap it up. Prediction for the game.
I think that we are going to control the ball. I think we are going to. I do think we'll score, and I feel like I curse the team every time I get too positive about them. But I'm good. I think we'll win it. but I think it's going to be a really difficult and uncomfortable win. And I feel like it'll be one of those 2-1 or 1-0ers. So I'm going to go for a 1-0. Let's go for a really sort of tetchy 1-0.
And I'm going to agree with Nigel Plum in the chat box. I'm going to go with Fulham 1, Arsenal 3. It feels kind of inevitable that we're going to concede at the minute. But I want to start the new year off right, end 2023 on a high. And like we said, look, if we can put this result behind us, we beat Fulham, we get a good result against Liverpool in the FA Cup, we make a couple of January additions, we beat Palace at the end of January. I'm really getting ahead of myself there. But if we're able to do all of those things, tick all of those boxes.
We didn't even beat West Ham, mate. I mean, that was supposed to be
look, I'm really getting ahead of myself there. So let's not go there. But Chris, before we go, do you want to enlighten us into your New Year plans? Maybe end it on a bit of a personal high?
My New Year plans, as in like resolutions, or
no, not resolutions, just plans for the evening if you've got any.
My plan for the evening is to go and have a nice curry with the wife, because I'm off into the New Forest for New Year's Eve. Unfortunately, that means I'm not going to be on the post-match preview. No, it's not a post-match preview. It's a post-match review, obviously. I'm not going to be there for that. So it'll be Amanda back on, I think it is actually, she'll be there on New Year's Eve. She'll be running the show. I don't know if James and I are you there?
I'm not entirely sure if we're doing it on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. I don't know what my plans are. I've got a 50-50 curry. I don't know if the curry is confirmed or if it's not happening. If it's not happening, I can probably do it. If not, then I'll be about on New Year's Day to do it. But
50-50 curry sounds like it's like I'll have half a curry and the other half can I just have fresh air. That's what it sounds like.
I mean, I wouldn't say no. We all know what the results of a dodgy curry can be. But look, I will leave it there, mate. Thank you as ever for joining me on the show. Difficult not to feel downbeat about last night, but let's get back to winning ways against Fulham and very quickly put this result behind us. And who knows? Who knows what the new year might bring?
Yeah, hopefully a title. Let's hope for a title, guys. Just as a reminder, Ruth Beckart, give her a shout. She very kindly sponsors the podcast. We do giveaways as well, so there'll be more of that in the new year. James, I think we should go and get some more Christmas alcohol. So let's say goodbye, shall we?
Absolutely. Yes. Goodbye, everyone. Have a fabulous new year, and we'll be seeing you very, very soon. From myself and Chris, see you later.
See you later, guys.